the BRICS might have just changed the financial system forever. We can see this week they just launched something called the unit currency. Now, again, this is very, very interesting. This is the first look that we have at a brand new currency. This is going to be 40% backed by gold and then 60% backed by the fiat currencies of the countries in Brazil, Russia, India, and China, as well as maybe a couple of other countries. So today we're going to have to be talking about the $37 trillion question. Is the BRICS going to take over the financial system? Will this currency be a success? We know right now that the BRICS GDP, it's bigger than America's. They have a lot of the world's gold. Everybody's looking at this comparison chart of the two major trading blocks around the world, and they're asking themselves the question, is China going to take over the world? I've got my own thoughts on this, but before we come back to this chart, I want to play you the video that everybody's been very focused on recently. This is Russia's economic advisor, and he kind of says the quiet parts out loud in this recent video talking about America's plan to reset its debt. Let's tune into this.
Правила на рынке золота и криптовалют. Америка прямо сейчас пытается поменять правила на рынке золота и криптовалют. Вспомните, какой у них долг. 35 триллионов долларов. В общем-то, это два альтернативных валютному сегменту мировых рынка. Действия Вашингтона в этом направлении отчетливо демонстрируют одну из главных американских задач. Они очень хотят решить проблему снижения доверия к доллару. США, как это было и в 30-е, и в 70-е годы, будут решать свои финансовые проблемы за счет всего мира, загоняя всех куда? В криптовалютное облако. Со временем, когда часть госдолга США будет размещена в стейблкоинах, США обесценит этот долг.
So as you can see, the gentleman's clearly speaking Russian, but I think the translations is pretty good. Everybody's been talking about this $37 trillion debt reset that America is trying, and what everybody's referring to is the Genius Act. So the Genius Act essentially forces stablecoins to hold US treasuries to back the stablecoins. Today, we know that massive companies like Tether hold literally hundreds of billions of dollars worth of stablecoins backed by US government debt. So in a world where China, Japan, Russia, India, and Brazil are dumping their US treasuries, we would see, hypothetically, massive inflation or devaluation of America's debt if nobody else was buying it. But this is where stablecoins come into it. There is hundreds of billions of dollars worth of US dollar stablecoins out there. And it isn't just Russia's economic minister talking about stablecoins and their very unique role in the global financial system. I want to play another video of Scott Bessent. This is the US Treasury, by the way. Let's listen to what he recently said as well on this topic.
Going to put a lot of thought into the stablecoin regime, and as President Trump has directed, we are going to keep the U.S. the dominant reserve currency in the world, and we will use stablecoins to do that. Thank you.
So there's two competing school of thoughts on this topic. I do have another video to play on this topic from Scotty
Woods Institute.
But I don't want to play that yet. The two schools of thought. Everybody understands we're moving away from government debt. Russia, Brazil, India, China, they're all moving towards gold. And America seemingly seems to be moving towards stablecoins. I think this could be interesting because when we start looking at which countries are buying more gold in particular, we can see a trend. So firstly, this is the GDP trend. I love this chart personally because it's just a great visualization showing how over the past couple of decades, BRICS has become a bigger and a bigger threat. And very recently, they actually surpassed the G7 nations in terms of GDP. So the G7 is America, France, Canada, all of your big, bloated Western nation states. And what else is very interesting? We're seeing a little bit of a scramble over gold. So we can see the BRICS countries now control over 20% of the world's gold. We can look, this here is, by the way, the official figures of the countries with the most gold. This is, again, I'll remind you, publicly reported figures of countries and how much gold they have. This is very, very important to be aware of because China, by the way, they are rumored to be sitting on a lot of gold. I'm going to show you a chart looking at what I think is the real figures in a moment. But right now we can see you've got America, Germany, Italy, France, some of the largest holders of gold in the world. These are our Western nations. But then we have other countries like India, China, and Russia climbing up this leaderboard. They are buying more and more gold. They are hoping that the same thing that happened in 1944 happens again. America was able to reset the financial system because they held 65% of the world's gold after World War II. Again, think about that. How did America get a hold of all of that gold in World War II? Germany and Hitler were invading all of the European countries, and all of the European countries were sending their gold to America. Again, that's where the mind starts thinking, hang on a minute, who is connected to what? I'm not going to get into conspiracy theories right now, but that's just facts. America reset the financial system because they held the gold. BRICS is assuming the same thing's going to happen. This here's one of my favorite charts. This is the share of gold as a percentage of its total reserves. So what this chart is showing is how much paper money, fake money, is there in each country compared to gold. And you can see since 2010, for the past 14 years, all of the BRICS countries have been increasing the amount of gold they have. All of these countries have been buying year after year. Give me all the gold. Give me all the gold. We're going to try to have more gold in our borders. Now, again, there are some caveats here. There are some obvious caveats. China is very indebted. I don't want this to sound like this is a kumbaya, China's dominating the world type of video. I'm going to try to show you both sides of the argument. Now, the reason why I think a lot of people are very, let's say, eating up Ray Dalio's thesis of the changing world order is a lot of people look at China as the next replacement of the US dollar. Now, again, to give that argument a little bit of credence, it is true that typically over the past 500 years, we can see by this chart that global reserve currencies are held by about 100 years. And we can see America took over the global reserve currency around 100 years ago off the Great British Empire. So again, if history repeats the same way it's been played out over the past 500 years, then we would expect a global reserve currency change today in the early 2000s. That's if history repeats. And it is true, by some measures, if you look at what makes a great country, by some measures, America is declining and China is rising. This is a chart straight out of Ray Dalio's book, The Changing World Order. It's a phenomenal book. He literally studied all of the great empires over the past 500 years, and they all follow this pattern. They take over the world for about 100 to 200 years. They take the global reserve currency, and then they're challenged by a rising empire. And now, so many people just think this is playing out again today. So many people think that China is that rising empire, and they're about to take over the world. Now, again, like I said a moment ago, based on some measures of how you measure the world and economics and population growth and economic might, it looks as if China's taking over the world. Now, again, let's be very clear. Some measures aren't always reliable. So publicly, we're going to get into how much gold China actually holds in a moment. But publicly, China claims to have a population of 1.4 billion people. But what's interesting is there's couple of conflicting pieces of data and information here that I think is a little bit interesting to be aware of. Hackers recently hacked into the CCP's database a while ago, and they found that they only had public information for 1 billion people in China. 400 million were missing, or just maybe not on the database. It's an explanation. But I do think that's interesting. And that is not the only event to have happened where, there's question about China's figures. Let me say that. I can say that. There's a geopolitical expert, Leland Miller, and he says, talking about China, it's all make-believe. They are absolute make-believe. So again, I think that is... I'm just going to put out there both sides of the argument, both sides of the story. Again, I've been critical of both countries, America and China, over the times. But something that I do think is very clear is nation states are clearly buying more gold. That's not debatable. Which is why I think this brand new currency coming out of the BRICS is super important. So again, what do they propose? They proposed this is going to be backed by gold. It's also going to be backed by fiat currencies. This is very, very, very interesting because all of a sudden, we're starting to see something that looks like a new financial system. Whether it can actually challenge the US dollar, that's a completely different story. A completely different story. We do know this is also one of my favorite charts going around. This is a 50-year chart looking at central banks' holdings. What is in their reserves? Is it gold or is it paper money? We can see the red on this chart is looking at, that's essentially governments buying paper money. Let me blow that up for you guys so it's super big and you can see what I'm working with. But you can see since 2012 in particular, something changed. We saw a trend shift. Central banks all around the world started buying gold. They said, yeah, you know what? After the US printed, $800 billion worth of gold during the global financial system, countries naturally became a little bit more skeptical of the paper money, the paper promises. They said, hang on a minute, you can devalue our money like that overnight? Yeah, we're not buying. We are not buying that trash. We want the real thing. And this is why right now at the time of this live stream, we can see the price of gold is going on an absolute tear. Zooming out a little bit further. I mean, that chart's kind of undeniable. Gold's doubled in the past 12 months. Again, the only times that gold has doubled in a year, I actually did some research on this for another video I've got coming for you guys. The last times that gold doubled in a year, it was in 1980, just before Paul Volcker took interest rates straight up to 20%. And I believe it was in 1922 and 1923 in Germany during that hyperinflation of the Weimar Mark. It's rare for gold to double as aggressively as it just did in under 12 months. McLovin says the gold bug's new. Oh, look at this. We got a new display here on YouTube. The gold bug's new. And this is the problem I think we're seeing in this currency transition. Germany will never see its gold again. Great comment from Incognito. And silver is also going nuts right now. We're going to have a look at silver in a moment for you guys. But I did promise another chart. I wanted to show you the real numbers of China's gold because publicly they say they've got 2,000 metric tons of gold. But if you, here's the chart. If you look at China's imports and you have a look at how much gold they mine in the country each year, some really astute analysts can make the case for China nearly having 30,000 metric tons of gold This chart here is brilliant because for those who don't know, China's gold mining companies within the borders, they're not allowed to export that gold. They're obviously still mining for gold. We don't know where it's going, but it's inside the border. So obviously all of the speculation here is that that gold is being bought up or sent to the PBOC, the People's Bank of China, the central bank. And you can see when you just extrapolate the numbers out, if you look at how much gold they've imported, that's the light blue bars, which went bananas post 2012. And if you look at the dark blue bars, this is the aggregate mining output of the Chinese mining companies. You can get to a situation where it's pretty easy to see that there's 28,000 tons of gold within the borders of China. And the red here is the official holdings of gold. You can see that's what, 2,000 to 3,000 metric tons right now. Now that's where things get a little bit head scratching. That's where things get super interesting. People start asking the question, well, wait on, what's actually going on? What is actually happening? Is the BRICS trying to reset the financial system based on gold? Well, let's break down this more recent announcement in a little bit more detail. So again, they're calling this the unit currency. That's what they're calling it. And you can see it's evolved over time. See, back in 2019, the BRICS were thinking about doing 40% gold, 60% US dollars, and other major currencies. However, obviously, the BRICS want to take power away from the dollar. So we can see this more recent announcement. The unit, Forbes says, rather boringly called the unit, it is going to be compromised 40% of gold, 60% of a basket of domestic fiat currencies. This is the kicker, of the participating governments. So this is China, India, Brazil, Russia, and so forth. So we can see here, this is interesting. For one thing, this allows the reserve assets of the unit currency to consist 60% of government bonds instead of relying on only gold. So you can see the BRICS have the same issue America has. Nobody wants to buy their pieces of paper. Nobody wants to buy the debt. That's, again, this isn't just an American problem. This is why America is embracing things such as stablecoins to find that it's not artificial, it's new demand for US bonds. And this has been in the name of the game for the past 15 years. In 2013 and 2014, America regulated the banking industry to be stuffed chock full of US treasuries. They said, sorry guys, you've got to hold more of this trash because Russia's not buying it. Russia started divesting away from US treasuries way back in 2013, 2014. Now the rest of the world is doing the same. I want to hear a little bit more from Scotty B. I've got another clip for you guys that I haven't played yet. This is Scotty B talking about the reset we're living through right now.
Institutions. Yet everywhere we look across the international system today, we see imbalance. The good news, it doesn't have to be this way. My goal this morning is to outline a blueprint to restore equilibrium to the global financial system and the institutions designed to uphold it.
So everybody's talking about reset. Again, we haven't seen a Bretton Woods agreement since 1944, but everybody's right now talking about what is normally whispered behind closed doors. And that is the fact we are living through a time when the economic system is being reset. Now, again, while we're talking about America's intentions as well as the BRICS intentions, again, what's really interesting about the Genius Act and stablecoins is what do you also see if you see more stablecoins around the world? Think about the countries with the most amount of stablecoin adoption. Argentina, Pakistan, Turkey, they're all massive countries. Argentina's got 45 million people. Turkey's about 90 million people. And Pakistan, I think, has a 200 million person population. These aren't small countries. What's interesting about all of them, they all have very high inflation. That's because they had high US debt. And to pay back the US debt, they had to print their local currency, devaluing its value, creating inflation to pay back the US debt. So they all have high inflation, high US dollar stablecoin adoption, but also high Bitcoin adoption. Now think about this. This has been what I've been talking about for 4 years now, since 2022, when I came up with the phrase, the Bitcoin milkshake theory. The countries with the highest Bitcoin adoption will also have high US dollar stablecoin adoption. Why? Well, if the Turkish lira has 200% inflation a year, it's too volatile to be used as savings, it's too volatile to be used as a medium of exchange, and it's too volatile to be used as a unit of account. So if a country like Turkey adopts Bitcoin in a massive way, you still can't use Bitcoin as a medium of exchange and a unit of account because it's still too valuable. And it will be it's too volatile. And it will be too volatile for the next 5, 10, 15 years. Which means you have to adopt US dollar stablecoins. This is why these countries have such high adoptions of not only stablecoins to be used as a medium of exchange, but then also Bitcoin to be used as a store of value. This is a natural symbiotic relationship. So what's interesting here is, what way is the American nations going to go? Are they going to adopt Bitcoin while BRICS adopts gold? I think that's the $37 trillion question everybody right now is wondering. Because now what is interesting about these BRICS nations in particular is the hedging and the wedging I think we're seeing. What I find interesting is all the countries on the border of Russia, well, they're not mining gold, they're mining Bitcoin. So we can see Kazakhstan, guess what they're doing? They're mining Bitcoin. Kyrgyzstan, another smaller country on the border of Kazakhstan, guess what they're doing? They're also mining Bitcoin. We know that Russia's been playing around with laws enabling the country to mine Bitcoin. By the way, if you want to mine Bitcoin yourself, I always encourage you why you should learn more about that. If you do want to get your hands on Bitcoin privately, mining it is the best way to get your hands on the Bitcoin. So again, if you do want to learn a little bit more, how you can not only mine Bitcoin privately, but also decrease your tax bill if you're an American citizen, highly recommend you check out what Blockware is doing. For those who don't know, if you've got 100K of capital gains in America that you have to pay in taxes, most people don't even know this, but you can buy $100,000 of Bitcoin mining hardware and potentially wipe out your capital gains. That's because of the big, beautiful bill that was recently passed in America by DJT. We're going to get into Trump in a moment. But again, book a call with Blockware, link down below for you to check out. If you want to learn a little bit more about mining Bitcoin. Again, there's a reason why a lot of these nation states are choosing to mine Bitcoin. It's a private way to get your hands on Bitcoin. I think it's the best way to get your hands on Bitcoin when you think about it. This is obviously how, now again, while we're talking about BRICS nations, this is how the Kingdom of Bhutan became the 4th biggest holder of Bitcoin. They were silently mining it in the Himalayan mountains. I've reminded you of this story so many times on the channel, so I'm not going to completely rehash it. We can see here. Geez, I need a good ad blocker. Bhutan has secretly mined Bitcoin in the Himalayas for years. They've been doing it since 2019. Now, again, what's interesting about all these countries? Why am I talking about random countries like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan? Well, they're neighbors of Russia. They're in close proximity to Russia. And what about Bhutan? Well, they're on the border of China. And who else, by the way? Laos. This is a tiny little country also bordering China. Did you know? They've been mining Bitcoin since 2021. Here's an article that backs up that up. So I think that's kind of interesting. And then when we're thinking about other nation states, what about El Salvador? What's really interesting, I think, is what Tether is doing. Because Tether was, for a long time, putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And they still are, by the way. But what a lot of people have been pointing to and critiquing a lot recently is Tether's moves to buy gold, put on the balance sheet, but also mine a ton of gold in El Salvador. A lot of people are now asking the question, oh, hang on a minute, what is going on? Because obviously, put it this way. In 2022, all the Tether truthers were saying, oh, Tether's going to collapse. Bitcoin's going to collapse because it's backed by the Ponzi Tether. Who remembers that narrative? People still somehow like think Tether's going to collapse and it's a Ponzi scheme and it's manipulating Bitcoin's price, which just dumbfounds me. Like when you look at how much Bitcoin's been bought by ETFs and public companies in the past 2 years. They bought 2 million coins, 10% of the supply. And people still think, oh, Tether is the only reason Bitcoin's at 100K. Anyway, that's a discussion for another day. But what's interesting is Tether right now, they've gone through a complete shift. In 2022, they started buying more US treasuries. I thought this was a pretty clear signal that they knew something that most people didn't. And now what's really interesting is they're relocating to the Bitcoin-friendly El Salvador. Now, what's fascinating about this is El Salvador recently found a lot of gold in the country. Let me get you the exact amount. Because Tether's buying Bitcoin with its profits, but then also buying gold with its profits. Now, here's the kicker. El Salvador, late 2024, supposedly found $3 trillion of gold in the country. And as all the headlines show, big mining companies circle El Salvador to prepare for them to essentially make it super easy for the mining companies to swoop in. So again, maybe there's a little bit of 4D chess going on right now. Maybe Fort Knox is completely empty and has been for 35 years. Again, who knows if America actually holds the gold it does? It's not transparent. We have no idea what's going on. The one audit that they did do of Fort Knox, I thought it was pretty underwhelming, to be honest. Again, what's interesting about El Salvador? Well, El Salvador actually, they hold Bitcoin. And what's super cool about El Salvador is they actually hold Bitcoin not only in their own self-custody. Again, I always tell you guys, if you don't own Bitcoin in one of these, a hardware wallet, you don't own it. But El Salvador holds Bitcoin in a multi-sig setup within the country. So that means for somebody to move Bitcoin out of El Salvador's country, you have to get your hands on multiple different hardware wallet devices to move the Bitcoin out of a wallet. That's what a multi-signature is. You need multiple signatures from multiple hardware wallets. This is obviously the gold standard when it comes to security. That's why I always encourage you guys to learn more about multi-signature wallets or time-locked Bitcoin wallets. I know it's a little bit confusing. I get that. I've struggled setting one up previously, which is why I partnered with Bitvault. Bitvault makes time-locked Bitcoin wallets and multi-sig Bitcoin wallets super easy. Again, they've got an application where you can set up these type of wallets in minutes. So I highly, highly, highly recommend you check out Bitvault. You can get yearly access to the app for $129. You can see this offer ends on the 31st of December. So join the pre-sale, take advantage of that discount while it lasts. As you can see, they make time delay wallets super simple, super easy. Look at this. They got multi-sig security. You can do it all on Bitvault. They make it easy. I get it. Bitcoin's a little bit complicated, but I think in the future when Bitcoin's $1 million a coin, start thinking about physical attack protection. Again, I travel all around the world. I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't have multi-sig setups. Again, I tell everyone, I have hardware wallets on me, but I can't move any of the Bitcoin I've got. All my savings are locked up in time-locked wallets, in multi-sig wallets, and I've got keys distributed in multiple different countries. I can't move the Bitcoin even if I wanted to. So again, if you want that peace of mind, check out Bitvault. There should be a link down below in the description for those guys. And here's the funny thing, by the way, about Fort Knox. Elon was supposed to audit Fort Knox. We didn't get that. Guess what else we didn't get? We also didn't get any sort of resolution with America's debt problem. This is, again, very linked to what we're talking about today. What happened in 2025? I was recently thinking about the major events of 2025. Okay, what happened? Trump was elected Bitcoin president of the world. He got in, he signed an executive order. There's a lot of hubbub about that. And then what else happened? Most people completely forget this, but we saw Doge. I'm hunting around for something that I want to show you guys right now. But everybody forgets what happened with Doge earlier in the year. Now, I was writing a little bit of a year in review, some of the biggest things that I think went completely missed this year. Again, that's going out my free Substack this week. I've probably spent 40 hours writing this thing. Also looking at what's probably most likely to come in 2026. So make sure you are subscribed to that. There should be a link down below for that free email I'm going to be putting more time into in 2026. But who remembers this? Who remembers Doge? On the 20th of January, 2025, the Department of Government Efficiency partnered up with the man with an IQ of 200, Elon, who's busy putting rockets on the moon, and not even he could solve America's debt problem. And right now, the reason why I think BRICS is accelerating its plan to create a new form of currency is because the money printer is coming in 2026. Trump's got $2,000 stimmies coming. Rate cuts are on the table when big old Jerome Powell gets the boot from Donald. We've already seen more rate cuts in September 2025 globally than we saw just after the global financial crisis in the 2008, 29, and 2010 era. We just saw the record amounts of US treasuries bought back in 2025. Again, a record. And right now, QE just started on December 12th, last week. QT ended on what, December 1st? And then 11 days later, the money printers are back on. It just shows there is no stopping this train. The debt problem, it is only going to get worse. The money printers are coming back. And this is only going to accelerate the transition to the new financial system. Now, again, I've tried to remain a little bit more impartial up until now. A couple of you guys in the comments have absolutely nailed it. Doge has been a massive underwhelmment. Again, the swamp. Was it drained? No, it wasn't. Again, I had the very controversial opinion when Trump got elected. I said, look, don't trust any politician. Even if they're saying the right things, they're pandering. Was the swamp drained? No. Is America buying Bitcoin? Publicly? No. Privately? I hope so. Was Doge a success? No. I could go on and on, but politics isn't what this channel's about. We like to stay grounded with economics. Let's move on and look at a little bit more of the economics of this reset. Because I think what's important to be aware of is right now, change happens in an exponential fashion. So for so long, people were able to ignore this trend of the BRICS silently growing, silently getting bigger. But I think now we're kind of in the crescendo, so to say, where things is going to happen really quickly. Things are going to accelerate here. I think just because we've lived in a world with relatively low volatility over the past 3 to 5 years, I don't think that means we can expect the same thing in the next 3 to 5 years. Again, the fourth turning started in 2008. Based on the book, the 22-year chapters of each turning, the first, second, third, and fourth. The fourth turning should end by 2030. That is 4 years away. Volatility is going to come. So I always tell you guys, be prepared for volatility. Don't only buy Bitcoin, put it in your own self-custody. That is why I always talk about hardware wallets on this channel. Again, I've used all the hardware wallets. This is the Trezor Safe 7 I've got on me right now. Again, if you've been putting off buying your own hardware wallet, there's a massive holiday season sale going on right now. So again, if you do want to get your hands on a Trezor, you can get up to 30% off if you use a code HOLIDAY25. That's going to get you discounts on a lot of the major hardware wallets. Trezor Safe 5, 30% off. Trezor Safe 3, 55 big ones. Again, go and get your hands on a hardware wallet. I think Trezor's a great option. Another great option is Ledger. Again, there's a reason why I partnered up with Ledger and Trezor. They've just got the easiest hardware wallets to use. And they've both been in the game for, 13 years? They were the two first hardware wallets created. I like to keep it simple. Again, there's lots of other great options, but Ledger and Trezor, it's just easy to use. I don't have to walk someone through how to use a hardware wallet for 14 hours on a phone call, like some of the other wallets I have to do. Again, Ledger, ton of holiday season discounts also available. You can get $70 of free Bitcoin with this voucher if you buy a Ledger Flex. You can also get $80 of free Bitcoin if you buy a Ledger Stacks. Both are incredible touchscreen hardware wallets. I actually also right now have my hands on one of these. This is the Ledger Nano Gen 5. Look at that little thing. Little touchscreen hardware wallets. Again, super easy to use, even if you've got big fat sausage fingers like myself. Again, take advantage of the holiday season discounts while they last. And don't be caught offside. Worldwide hyperinflation is closer than years. So my mental operating model for the next 10 years, I think what we're going to see, and I think this quote came from Saylor, so credit's where credit due, but he said what you're going to see is fiat currencies collapse into the US dollar, and you're going to see all of the capital in the world collapse into Bitcoin. So this is more like my multi-decade blueprint of what's going to happen, but you're going to continue seeing what we've seen in Argentina, Pakistan, Turkey, all of the countries with the highest amount of debt and the weaker fiat currencies. They're going to hyperinflate their currency and they're going to be forced to dollarize. Again, there's 52 countries that use the US dollar as their local currency. You're going to see more and more of that. You're going to see 100 countries, then 150 countries using the US dollar. And eventually you're going to be left with, I think, just the US dollar and Bitcoin. Do I show resemblance, or is it the name to somebody from Simple Minds? Could be aging myself there. I don't know who that is. But I think, so again, to answer the comment, Johnny, I think hyperinflation could certainly happen, and it's going to happen in many countries, but I think it's going to happen in the US last. And I think that's always been my base case, but I think America's done an even greater job to make sure that is confirmed by, once again, playing an economic wild card, like rolling out stablecoins and forcing them to adopt US treasuries to hold. By the way, I want to show you a chart. I believe Tether is in the top 15 biggest holders in the world of US Treasury debt. Think about that for a minute. Just think about how consequential that is. Tether now holds more US debt than South Korea and Germany. By the way, Germany was the largest manufacturing powerhouse in the entire world, and they're about to surpass Brazil. Again, the BRICS, it's really built on China, but it's very reliant on India and Brazil. Brazil's got a population above 200 million. They're the largest economy in South America. They are a massive anchor for the BRICS alliance going against America. Tether alone, a private company, is going to hold more treasuries than Brazil. So yeah, Japan and China could be selling 30% of their treasuries over the past 5 years like they have. But if Tether just steps in and becomes a buyer, they are Uncle Sam's sugar daddy, as I called them 3 years ago in 2022. This is actually massive. I'm still surprised people are sleeping on this, and the Tether truthers are saying Tether's going to collapse and Bitcoin's going to collapse. It's just such a nonsense article at this stage. Like, it's so beyond like old news. Like, maybe this is a 2017 argument when Tether wasn't doing quarterly attestations. But again, I very rarely write. I only write when I feel like there's something big to write about. But again, in 2022, I wrote this: how the United States weaponizes the dollar to retain global hegemony. And it's going to do this through the Bitcoin milkshake theory with Tether. You could see here, the trend was undeniable in 2022. In 2022, it was obvious. This is the chart of stablecoins. At the time, they were like 30% backed by treasuries, but they were aggressively buying more. And I said, like, watch this trend. People are buying more US treasuries. BlackRock was putting $400 million of funding into Circle's USDC stablecoin. And I think as I said here, America backing its currency with US dollar stablecoins, if that's backed by stablecoins, that's the economic wildcard that America is going to pay. Again, I believe I've also written an article on this in my newsletter down below. It's free. Subscribe. I'm going to be putting more time into that. This year in particular, got some deep dives planned, in particular for the end of 2025 and the beginning of 2026. So check that out if you're interested. But I think a lot of people right now, they're looking at this new BRICS currency and they're saying, okay, this is the savior, this is the thing. I'm not so sure because of that first reason. I don't think China has the population it says it does. I'm also not super bullish on these other currencies that's been squashed into the basket of this new unit currency that BRICS just rolled out. For example, let's have a look at the Brazilian currency. Chart's kind of trash. Let me get some more data. But like, China's currency isn't strong. This is Brazil's currency against the dollar. It kind of looks like the Bitcoin chart, doesn't it? Higher lows, higher highs. That's because the dollar is just perpetually getting stronger and stronger and stronger against Brazil's currency for the past 18 years. This goes back to 2012. So about 16 years, sorry. Who else is in the BRICS? India. Let's have a look at the rupee. What else is in the BRICS? Brazil, Russia, India, China, CNY. This thing's honestly just been going sideways for a while. We'll see what happens next. But again, I think my big takeaway here is gold kind of feels like a reversion. It feels like a reversion. I mean, gold's kind of failed. I know when I say that, that's an inflammatory statement when I say gold has failed. But if you just think about it, right now, there's $900 trillion of wealth in the world. Gold is 30 trillion. Gold's 3% of the global money supply. On a gold standard 100 years ago, gold was at least 30, 40% of the world's wealth. That's because gold was money. And in a world when money is functioning, we put the majority of our excess savings and excess money into money because money was doing its job. It preserved purchasing power. But today we've got $350 trillion of money squashed into the real estate market. Housing's been monetized because gold didn't function as money for the past 100 years in the 20th century. We've got $100 trillion of government debt. We've got $100 trillion of fiat money. We've got all of these different buckets functioning as money because money failed. That's why gold's 3% of global wealth today, not 50 or 40 like it was 100 years ago. So I agree. Like, again, the US dollar is the biggest scam in the world today. Fiat money is a scam. They're all trash. The US dollar is just going to go into the trash can last. It's just the order of the events here. Now, let's also make a good point. Don't get me wrong. Gold has performed incredibly well this year. It's doubled. Like I said, this typically screams reset coming. But again, from a personal standpoint, sure, you can hold a little bit of gold in your backyard. I used to bury it when I had a home and when I used to hold gold back in like 2016, 17 in Australia. But again, what are you going to do with gold if you need to move countries? Again, I always like to remind you of this. Plane passenger caught smuggling gold nuggets in rectum to try to hide from taxes. Now, I don't know about you guys, but those don't look like nuggets to me. Those don't look like they'd fit comfortably up the wazoo. This is the biggest problem. If you've got all your wealth in gold, you can't take it across border. This is another reason why gold failed to scale in the digital age. This is why paper promises were built on top of gold. Because gold simply did not scale. I've also seen people successfully wearing gold and crossing a border, but I've also seen other people fail crossing a border, wearing $100,000 worth of gold on their wrist as a bracelet. You're flirting with fire, my friend. This is the big problem. You can't take gold across a border. It's a huge problem. Now, again, I don't want to... Gold's fine. If there was something I had to buy aside from Bitcoin, I'd buy a little bit of gold. Don't get me wrong. I just think Bitcoin is a better option. It's easier to use. It's easier to buy anonymously. It's easier to store. We talked about the technological advancements that we're seeing in the Bitcoin space. Hardware wallets are getting easier to use every year. Every year, a new great idea gets invented, like Bitvault. Becomes easier to create a multi-sig wallet or a time-locked Bitcoin wallet. And this is the problem with gold. Nobody can create gold bars with little wings on them. It's not going to work. And that's obviously why this channel is more focused on Bitcoin. I don't want it to sound like we're just focusing on the problem. Gold's fine. Gold's good, but it failed in the digital age. I think it's as simple as that. I've been yapping for 49 minutes here. Damn, I'm still lagging. Apologies. I got too much trash on my laptop. If you enjoyed this one, make sure you subscribe. Going live at least 3 times a week, 4 times a week. Might even have a little bit of a Christmas special on the cards for you guys. So make sure you don't miss that. Make sure you're subscribed. Yeah, I mean, with all that said, guys, Christmas is coming. Happy Christmas. And I'll leave this one here. Have a good weekend. I'll see you all this week.